Welcome to Honcho on the Air, a podcast that brings you the latest talks and the latest trends in business, technology, innovation, and the candid side of C-level executives. Each week on this season, we explore topics and issues on human resources, management, leadership, HR technology, recruiting, talent management, organizational culture, and strategic HR.
Honcho on the Air is sponsored by Aces Business. Trust the expert. Now back to the show.
Our guest today is Pierre Monserrate. He is the Chief Human Resources Officer of East West Banking Corporation. His background encompasses all the facets of HR across a variety of industries such as financial services, FMCG, manufacturing, food and beverages, telecommunications, electronics, logistics, and distribution. He is going to share with us ways HR leaders can build new capabilities during a crisis. Hi, Pierre, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, Claire, and good afternoon to all of you. It's good to be here.
Good to have you here, Pierre. So, first of all, can you share with us your views on training and people development during this time of crisis?
Yes, let me just start with the premise that it's been challenging for all of us. I haven't met any leader or company, had come across any company in the world, for that matter, who's gone through this in a challenging way. And the first things that most companies did was to try to find ways to survive, particularly when you talk about small, medium, and even to some extent large companies. And we've seen a lot of examples of companies that's closed down, shut down shop. Mm-hmm. Now, the challenge for companies as they survive is what's next and how do they grow? And the challenge also remains is how do I curb my cost because business is not good, or maybe my business has not reopened during this time of the pandemic. So what's in the future for me? And even before I start thinking that, a lot of companies have started to cut costs. And sadly, the first thing that they do is to look at the people component. Because if you look at the financial statement, the biggest item in fixed cost, it would be salaries and wages and things that are related to people, such as learning and development. So there are a lot of companies, for the right reasons, actually, decided to slow down, if not cut down completely, their training budgets. Mm-hmm. Now, in my humble opinion, the companies who have thrived in this pandemic and will come out in a better position are those who are willing to invest in that future. And no matter how you look at it from any angle, that future will always involve people. Any company, for it to thrive in that new normal, everyone's been talking about that new normal still, and that's still the buzzword today, mm-hmm. is to be able to prepare yourself for what that looks like, and your business and your organization to be prepared when the gates open, you're ready to run. And mm-hmm. therefore, with that general mindset, learning and development actually is important, and now is the time to invest in it. And just be more purposive and targeted in what you do. So generally, what my view is that companies should relook at what they want to achieve, in the new normal and what that looks like. And when they are clear with what that looks like, what should they focus on in terms of developing the needed capabilities, competencies, skills required of the organization for that new normal.
Mm-hmm. Since you mentioned cutting costs and people training, many companies, like you said, naturally cut costs in a time as this. And one common item included in things that are put on hold are people costs like training, as you said. What's your view on this?
Well, yes, it's good to be prudent and it's good to be practical, but it should not be zero. When you cut it, it should not be zero. As I mentioned earlier, you need to define what that new normal is for your company. Once you've defined it, what capabilities are needed to deliver and operate in that new normal? And straight away, you do an assessment in terms of what capabilities do I possess now? So for example, I'll just try to simplify and give a simple example. Businesses like restaurant business, Before they operated only. I know of a restaurant. How do you call that entrepreneur who's into food and restaurants? So he's into a restaurant chain. He always operated in dine-in, and obviously during the lockdown, he could not operate. So he had to think outside the box. And he said, I take pride in the quality of the food, and therefore it's just his trust is just to serve it on premise in the restaurant. But now he had to think differently. So he had to relook at his mantra of serving quality food and translate that to I need to shift that to delivery so that I can continue to survive. And
Correct.
now he's shifting from 80% dine in, 20% takeout. He's shifted to 70% delivery, and then 30% takeout during the first 6 months of the pandemic. Now that restaurants are allowed to open, they're still limited in terms of the number of people in their restaurants. So that's an example. If he's clear on that, he will be able to identify what capabilities maybe he has, but maybe it's not well established, or maybe he doesn't have those capabilities. And that's where learning and development training programs come into play, in terms of if you are clear with what capabilities will deliver that new organization that you're painting in this new normal, what program should I put so that I can develop my people to be prepared for that?
So that's for restaurants and some other service-oriented businesses. What about companies and organizations with employees who are mostly work from home? What types of people development is most effective in this new work environment that could be given to these employees who are, like I said, working from home these days?
I would still give the same answer. You need to be clear of what that new normal is for your company, and then identify the competencies, capabilities, skills required to operate in that new normal. And then now the challenge is, what platform do I use because my people are working from home? As opposed to, I can send them off to this public course, I can hire a consultant, or I have a training department in-house who normally runs face-to-face trainings. But now the situation has changed and people are working from home, as you mentioned. So how do I train my people given this new setup? And so now a lot of people are going through online training and even offline training, which I'm happy to share a little bit more later on.
Yes, you mentioned platforms. So what role do these learning platforms play these days, and how important is digitization in learning and development?
Absolutely, it's very very critical at this time, and it's not just in learning; it's across different facets of any business. But going back to learning, a lot of companies have always gone for blended learning, particularly the bigger ones, the multinationals, for example, right? There are a lot of different platforms, like most of it are online. So it's still live, but it's online, right? Like what we're doing now, it's online. Rather than we do it face to face, we're doing something online, and people watch it and they learn by attending something that is live. An offline training platform is something that you can tap on demand. Similar to, like, say, Netflix, maybe is a good example, right? It's an on demand. You can play it whenever you're free. You can pause it when you're kind of busy for that day, and you can play it again in the next time around when you're free. So that's an online offline approach. I would advise organizations to look at development holistically. And my normal approach would be a formula of following the 70-20-10 rule. So 10% of the learning is from formal training programs, 20% is through coaching, and that's either through live coaching or offline coaching, and the 70% is on the job. Now, when you design a program following that formula, you will have interventions for all of each part. Because what I've noticed is that there are a lot of programs available out there, whether it's online, offline, or face-to-face. You feel good after attending, and then there's no follow-through, and you don't get to apply it So that's the challenge right now. What's the follow through? So if you follow that 70-20-10 rule, one program, say for example, leadership development program, that's one big program that encompasses a lot of modules and facets, right? So you run one in the 10%, you run a formal program there, and then you follow through by designing a coaching and mentoring session, whether it's with the line manager or external coach or an offline learning platform, which the participant can access on his or her own time. And then the 70% is application on the job.
Got
And
it.
it's just one topic on leadership, is what I'm saying, rather than you attend, a myriad of a lot of training programs, and that's it. You feel good, and then you revert back to your comfort zone. You
Right.
don't apply what you learn.
Right. So follow through is just as important as the actual training itself. Now, leaders, Pierre, are extra busy these days, especially in a time of crisis, navigating this new normal. Well, it's been a couple of months now, but still navigating, I would say. However, I think everyone would agree that learning should not stop. What's your advice on how to achieve a certain balance?
Be purposive. Be purposive on what you need to learn, and a lot of learning. Actually, a lot of business leaders I've spoken, during the time of the crisis, even at the start, from the very beginning, they're always trying to bounce off ideas. Asking, learning. That is a learning mindset already to me. So I think a leader should start with having a learning mindset and being open-minded. I've also met leaders who are kind of steadfast in their ways. My business is this, a construction company, for example. I met a business leader who runs a construction company. We cannot do work from home. My people need to be out there building those buildings or the houses, right? I said, well, yes, but if you try to dissect it, if you have a learning mindset, you will realize that there are parts of your business that can work from home. The back end support to all of that, your finance, your HR, your purchasing, and so forth and so on. And if they're working from home, there's a pause anyway, right? So there's a pause. You're not constructing at this moment. So whether it's your people on the ground or people working from home, you have an opportunity to expose them to learning. What are those capabilities? For example, you're the business leader. What capabilities do you think is required during this pandemic? So when in that conversation, we ended up with him realizing that, yes, I think I need to deal with ambiguity more. Is a capability that he's realized he needed, and he realized he didn't have, because when this pandemic hit, he didn't know what to do. He was kind of sure of, this is my business, this is how I used to do it, I'll just follow it through. Now he's put in a situation where he's not used to, and he doesn't know how to deal with it. So dealing with ambiguity is a competency that he's identified in my conversation with him, that he needs to learn. I said, well, great that you've realized that. Now go and find it. Go and look for that program, that person that can teach you, show you examples on how to deal with ambiguity. And then try to teach that to the rest of your people.
Honcho on the Air is sponsored by Globe Labs. Redefine possibilities. Like what you hear so far? Make sure you never miss a show by clicking the follow button now. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Thank you for your support. Now back to the show.
Could you give some suggestions on what learning methodologies and programs are available out there that can help business leaders and organizations at this time?
There are heaps available. Now, what a lot of people are trying to do, because they're trying to look for answers, is that they attend normally webinars. And webinars, there are a lot of webinars. Now, it's good because you can bounce off ideas, or you can listen to experts who would share their experiences, right? And how they've dealt with the pandemic and a lot of other challenges probably that might be related to them. Now, the challenge with just pure webinars and learning in webinars is that it might not be specific to what you're looking for. It might not answer all your questions. And many of the webinars is just one way in terms of communication. because they're normally attended by a lot of people. It's difficult to just ask all your questions, right? And so some people then attend the online training programs where it's face-to-face. The challenge with online training programs, similar to a face-to-face, is that the attention span of people is quite short. Especially when it's online. My advice is don't go for a whole day program because you'll be exhausted at the end of the day. And so what I suggest is go for a combination of, like what I mentioned earlier, online, offline. No, just recently, maybe just to cite an example, I've spoken to one of the founders anyway. I've come across this online platform. It's called Pocket Mentor, and you guys can freely look them up. Yeah? It's an on-demand thing that they have several. It's like an app that you can access in your smartphone or in your iPad.
Pocket Mentor.
Pocket Mentor.
And what is
it's quite interesting. They compiled together several mentors and coaches where they did a study that the attention span is about 15 minutes. So what they did is they dissected modules of learnings into short 8-minute videos. And then, so if you subscribe to them, or if a company subscribes to them, they can have an access to all of these topics and all of these coaches and mentors. And if they identify that these topics are applicable to, say, my leadership team,
right?
They can on demand, on their own free time, because sometimes the challenge also is disruption of work in attending these programs. So in their own free time, they can watch specific topics that is applicable to them, and which is just a short period of time, an 8-minute long video. Now that's a good complement to an entire plan if you put that in my 70-20-10 model, because it's on demand, it's short, it doesn't disrupt your business. You need all hands on deck during this crisis, but at the same time, mindful that you need to learn at the same time, and you want a learning organization to go through this crisis and be prepared for that new normal. So it's one solution, right? And then you can have several solutions. Just remember my suggestion of following that 70-20-10 rule. So if you attend a program online or offline, do I need somebody to then guide me in how that is translated to actionable plans? And then how do I then apply that in my work day to day, which is the 70%, and what assessment or evaluation should I put to find out if I'm progressing or not?
Right.
And then learning is complete. The learning is complete because it follows that cycle. It's like any skill. My favorite example is driving. Driving a vehicle, right? In the beginning, there's so many things to learn. Yeah, and then you're so conscious about it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, even if you go through reading all the rules, it's not enough, because you need to apply it.
Yes.
So the application of it is the actual driving. And as you keep on driving, it becomes a habit. So you have translated knowledge that you learned from someone, you learned from a training program, you applied that knowledge, it becomes experience. Experience that is repeated forms habits.
Now, my question is now, once you do, let's say, apply it to your day-to-day job, how do you know if it's effective? Is there a way to gauge that for business leaders to look at their employees and the workflow and the productivity to see that if the training is actually working?
Yes, that's also my common question. What does success look like? My suggestion always is to link it with your business goals. So if your goal, for example, is, apart from weathering the pandemic and surviving it, the next is, how do I grow it back to where my business was before? So if I lost, for example, 15% of my volume in the past year, how do I gain that back in the next year? So if that is your goal, if you translate that to what capabilities I need, if you translated it, you've identified those capabilities, then you went through a program to gain the knowledge on those capabilities, and you apply it. Is it giving back to, do you see progress that you are going up and on track on hitting the 15% growth that you were targeting, as an example? Then it becomes very purposive. Learning becomes purposive because it is a means to an end. You have an objective that you're aiming for.
Baby steps, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So now that we have a lot of people working from home in many companies, how do you or how do the employees or management help their employees address online fatigue?
Whew, yeah, that's a big question. There is no one right answer as well. Um, I would suggest to look at it holistically and look at it from an overall employee well-being perspective. Mental health is a big issue now. A lot of people are saying it. No, it's just culturally in the Philippines we're not really open to discuss that, as opposed to say in the Western Hemisphere where it's normal, it's okay not to be okay, and to openly discuss that. And there's a lot of support, a support system. Now, some Filipinos are starting to speak up and saying, it's this is really challenging because I could not, define and put a barrier between personal and work. Working from home, for example, I work extended hours. I lose track of the time, and the feeling of really not having that balance because it's always work, work, work. Um, and therefore, if you look at it holistically, what part and identify and diagnose which parts of employee well-being is important to your employees. And then you can come up with the right interventions to put in place. Because I can always say, implement mental health awareness. Yeah, that's a shotgun approach. It might be good, but it will not really address the root cause of the problem, is what I'm saying. So the way to address the fatigue that you asked earlier is to first identify the root cause. Does it really exist in your organization? If it does, which part? And what are the symptoms? And then if you constantly engage and ask your employees, you'll understand where they're coming from and potentially the root cause of that fatigue. So, for example, is it really a mental health issue? Now, if you accept that you're not an expert on mental well-being, maybe you can tap an expert. There are several experts in the Philippines who might be able to offer some help to you and your organization.
What other, aside from possible online fatigue that employees may be experiencing, what other challenges do you see with this new setup in this new normal? And how do you deal with it? How do you address it as in management?
Yeah, the one of the things that I've encountered. So online fatigue is one. You mentioned that already. Another one is how would I describe it? There's I haven't encountered the word that people use, but I'll just try to describe it. The ability to people are human beings are used to communicating face to face. That human interaction. Um, Not many people are used to talking to a machine, a computer, right? Even if you turn on your videos. And what I've noticed also when I attend meetings is that not many people open their videos. Because straight from bed, they just woke up, they don't dress up. So my suggestion is have a routine, and the routine actually um, prepares the mind. You need to condition your mind that you are going to work, so that when work is done, you need to condition your mind that you are going to end the work. As opposed to before, it was easy because you're really going to get up, dress up, take a shower, have breakfast, dress up, wear your uniform if you have one, or dress up for work, and you go to work. But right now, your work is in the living room, in the dining room, in your home office. So if you have not trained your mind that you're going to work, your body will feel like you're still at home, and it will fight against what's in your mind that you're trying to restart it because you're going to work, which is online. So that's where the challenge is, and that contributes to online fatigue, which is also that other one that I'm trying to mention, is having that human connection. People are starting to feel a bit lonely, that they don't have that connection. And apart from seeing each other just in a video, most meetings they don't turn on their videos, and therefore you just hear the voice,
Mhm.
right? And not many people speak up in a meeting, and therefore it feels like you're just talking to yourself.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
that's another challenge.
Right. How do you, as management, how do you motivate your employees to be able to do that, to turn on their cameras, or participate in these online meetings? Because as you say, it's quite different when you are in person and meeting, and you have pretty much no choice but to participate and be there, not just physically but mentally, and your whole being.
Yeah.
But being online and at the other side of the your computers, and with your cameras off, how do you motivate or help your employees to participate more and be there 100%?
Yeah. Well, what I did exactly, because I'm new to my company. So on my first day, on my first week actually, I engaged my leadership team, and we talked about ways of working. And I drew it out from them in terms of how should we operate, in this time of crisis where it's work from home, and we're just seeing each other. And then we identified also some of the issues that we're currently experiencing, and therefore that went back into the conversation around our ways of working. We were norming, and one of the things that surfaced there is that feeling of, it's as if I'm talking to myself, because I don't see, I miss the face-to-face interaction. And that's the opportunity when I drew that out, an opportunity where I jumped in and said, well, what's the next best thing? Because the reality is, let's not forget that the objective of the organization is to stop the spread of the virus in our company. And part of that is supporting work from home setup. So we don't need to necessarily take the risk of going out of our homes and be exposed to the virus. Having said that in mind, what's the next best thing of having a face to face? And then somebody said, well, maybe we should turn on our videos. I said, that's a brilliant idea. So what I'm trying to say is I drew it out from them, by putting them in the situation and asking the right questions. And when it became a suggestion, we then agreed and aligned that that's one of the ways of working that we will hold each other accountable for. So we came up with a list, and one of which is, when you're speaking, because some of them identified that they have internet issues when their videos are open all the time, because it
Correct.
eats up a lot of bandwidth.
Right.
So the ways of working we agreed was, when you're speaking, you should turn on your video. That's the first. And then the second one is what I suggested, which I failed to mention earlier. Apart from having that mindset that you're going to work, dress up for work. If you're going to work, dress up.
Mhm.
Right? So, and I try to lead by example by not wearing a coat all the time, but at least a long sleeve shirt. So it gives a semblance of, that it makes your body feel that you're really working, as opposed to from straight from the bed, because I found that some people really do that, and I was kind of surprised. Straight from bed, because they slept late because of work. Now they have an opportunity to sleep in a bit, and then when they wake up, they just turn on their computers. They can attend the meeting without turning on their videos, because nobody sees them anyway.
Mhm.
So again, so going back to that, the ways of working that we agreed on, one of that was, apart from showing up at work online, be at work in your mind and physically as well. So meaning dressing up. And then I was teasing them, because when you say dressing up, you don't have to wear the whole attire now,
just just the
right? It's
upper
just
half.
yeah.
Right. Just to, Pierre, round up some of the things that we talked about, since we are running out of time. You mentioned, there's the change and then the transformation. So again, just to remind people watching, can you help us understand the difference between these two, and how to go from, or effectively go from change to transformation?
Yeah, that's a good question. Um, in my humble opinion, they're two different things. A lot of people think that transformation is change. When you ask somebody, what's transformation? That's change. In my humble opinion, they're not the same. In my view, uh, you change to correct the past, you transform to create the future. One precedes the other. You need to first change to correct the past before you go and transform and create the future. Now, not all organizational changes are transformative in nature. And it's not wrong. So you need to be clear. If for example, I head the company and what I'd like to do is efficiency, make sure that I maximize my cost through efficiency improvements. That's organizational change. I'm changing some of my processes, the way I operate, so I can correct what I used to be doing. Now, you can stop there. You don't necessarily need to transform if you don't have to. Now, what the pandemic did, it was the ultimate disruptor in any industry. It disrupted all industries, and therefore it started to make leaders think of, is change enough for me? And therefore, that's when a lot of companies now are starting to transform so that they can adapt to that new normal that they're trying to paint, if that makes sense, right? If I may be allowed to give a very, simple example, health, personal health. You want to be healthy, okay? You need to change your eating habits. For example, if I like fatty food, I like salty food, you need to change your eating habits. You need to change your lifestyle. For example, I don't exercise. If you want to transform to unhealthy individual. So again, it depends on who you want to be and what you want to achieve. As an individual, if you want to achieve, okay, I'm very clear that I want to grow old enough to appreciate my grandkids. And to grow old enough, I want to be healthy. So I want to transform myself from being unhealthy to unhealthy individual so that I can grow old enough to appreciate my grandkids. So that's a very good purpose, right? A very clear goal. And therefore, what do I need to change first so that I can transform? That's what I'm saying. So that's why it's not the same. One precedes the other.
Yes. Well, wonderfully said, Pierre. Thank you so much again for joining us today. That was a really great closing remark.
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you for joining us this week on Honcho on the Air. Make sure to visit our website, cnhr.org, where you can subscribe to us on Spotify so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, make sure to like and subscribe to our social media pages to get the latest news and updates. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next episode.